Good Erev Shabbos, dear friends, family. It's always wonderful to share a few words of Torah with you, particularly as we continue on our very special process of understanding the Jewish pattern through exile and to redemption. As I mentioned to you a few weeks ago, right at the beginning of the book of Exodus, just as we start the Jewish people's travails and difficulties and challenges that we read about in the text, we are already given notice about our complete and final redemption. As the Midrash says clearly, and these are the names of the Jewish people, Reuben, Shimon, etc., indicating the final redemption as they came into Egypt as Reuben, Shimon, and though they suffered 210 years of almost total assimilation, integration, enslavement, difficulties, and all kinds of the most horrific challenges, Reuben and Shimon are the same ones that left Egypt. They did not forget their identity. They retained their essence of being who they are. And we continue in this conversation of Moses being sent to be the savior of the Jewish people, his dialogue with God, actually his challenging God in a certain sense, that brings us to the beginning of this portion. After God sends Moshe Rabbeinu to Pharaoh to tell him to let the Jewish people leave Egypt to serve him, and the time has come for them to achieve their freedom, and that he is coming as an emissary from God, and he shows him certain signs that are miraculous aspects, that he could only have the power to do that if God gave him that capacity. Pharaoh, instead of softening his position and recognizing that he's now dealing with a much more powerful adversary than he ever had met before, and even though he said, "Who is this God that you're talking about? Who is God? I don't know any God like that." He denied the existence of God. That was one of his fundamentals. He really took that seriously. He denied three things. The Abarbanel tells us, a famous, very, very erudite commentary on the Torah. He says that Pharaoh had three issues with God. Number one, the fundamental aspect is he did not believe in God at all. He thought he was God. As our rabbis tell us, that Pharaoh says, "I am the river and I made myself." The river was one of the gods of Egypt because it supplied them the irrigation necessary for having the most verdant, fruitful kind of environment of any place in the Middle East. They grow the best cotton and the best figs and the best dates and olives, etc., because of the overflow of the Nile and the tributaries. So he said, "I am the Nile and I'm God," because the tributaries were all handmade. He didn't need God. It's not a rainy environment, so that was not God's influence that made the earth fruitful. It was Pharaoh's brilliance, his strategies, his capacity, his engineering skills, etc. So he didn't believe in God at all. The second thing was, he did not believe that there was any such thing as divine providence. He did not believe that God, or the master creator, or the master of the universe, actually oversees with providence every single step of every single person, every single movement of every single creature, of every single creation of the universe, even the leaf that falls off a tree. He did not believe in that. And then he did not believe that there was such a power that could go against nature. Nature operates in its own vast, vast power that one cannot imagine even the forces that are existent in nature, as you know, storms, earthquakes, fires, etc. Earthquakes and fires and floods. Nature is extremely powerful, and there was no force that could overcome nature. God could not overcome the natural order. And the Barbanel explains that the 10 plagues that were administered to Pharaoh was to eliminate Pharaoh's thinking in that pattern. And maybe we'll have a chance to talk about it a little bit later. But coming back to the fact that Pharaoh had these extraordinary forces of disbelief, forces of self-importance, extremely egocentric. He was an egomaniac. He was the king, the boss, the god. He bathed the Jewish children's blood just because he was having some skin problems. So instead of softening his position when Moses came to him with Aaron and showed him the miracles, he hardened his position. He made the Jews work harder, more difficult. Many details in their work order that were forced upon them as a result of Moses coming to them. And he says, Pharaoh says, you think you had it easy, hard till now? Wait till I show you what to do. So this imaginary savior is going to come and save you. And he was more difficult on the Jews. And Moshe Rabbeinu says at the end of last week's portion, he asks this extraordinary question. He actually confronts God. And he says, why did you do bad to these people? You sent me to redeem them. Instead of being better for them, you made it worse for them. God waits until this week's portion and he answers him. And he says, I appeared to Abram, Isaac, and Jacob. But before that, Rashi says, and I appeared to Abram, Isaac, and Jacob. What does Rashi say? And I appeared? Rashi says, El Ha'avos, to our patriarchs. But the text says specifically Abram, Isaac, Jacob. Why does Rashi have to add the word patriarchs? Rashi only comments on something that needs explanation in the text. This is quite clear. But he says to Moshe, I want you to know something, that you cannot start your existence from this moment. This moment is not the moment that Jewishness starts, that you started. You are entering into a process. We already have fathers. Those fathers are only three. And what those fathers established was the fundamental, genetic, intuitive, spiritual, forceful existence of this powerful Jewish nation. And therefore, whatever happens, I want you to know that we have a foundation of power which is our extraordinary, powerful past, our fathers. That's who we built on. And actually Rashi comments later that God said to Moses, I'm sad that those people never asked me any questions. I told Abraham the land is yours and he had to buy a burial place for his wife. He had to spend top dollar. I told Isaac the land was his. And the Avimelech slaves, they just restuffed the wells that your father dug. I promised Yaakov the land. And he had to buy a piece of land in Shechem just to be able to settle down there. They could have said, hey, the land is mine. God gave it to me. They asked no questions. They followed the pattern of how I conducted their lives. That is the way of Jewishness. Jewishness is a process. And whatever happens is only a preparation for something better that will happen. And that's why we come to the plagues that we start reading about this week's Torah portion that answers Pharaoh's questions. All the plagues point to the fact, you think there's no God? Let me show you who God is. You think that God doesn't conduct everything in life? Let me show you how he conducts everything in life. You think that God doesn't overcome nature? Watch God overcome nature, and he turns all the natural forces into those destructive forces like the locusts, like the darkness, etc. Overcomes those forces. He showed them all that, but at the same time, the plagues were made to process this process of freedom, a process of liberation. Mitzrayim was not a space where you entered into in order to suffer. It was not a place where you entered into because you did bad things that had to now do good things. It was a place you had to enter into in order to sanctify even the lowliest place in the world to become a dwelling place for God. And it took the Jew, through the Makkahs and through God's involvement, to be able to refine that which was able to be refined in Egypt. And when they refined it to the extent where Pharaoh finally agreed, yes, leave the land, there is a God, I accept it. There was total transformation of the Egyptian culture, of the Egyptian thought process. Now the Jew could move on to the next level of where he has to continue to perfect the world. And then, in order to take a world order, until now he was a nation in Egypt. As Ezekiel the prophet says, the Jew was a nation born from the womb of another nation. We came out of Egypt as a nation. We walked into Egypt as a family. We came out of Egypt as a nation family. But then as a nation family, we had to take the role of being a light into the nations. And for that, God gave us an extra power, taking us out of Egypt through that process and bringing us the greatest miracles, the greatest gifts, and the greatest revelation as God shared with us His plan for this universe manifest and how we can conduct ourselves according to that plan. And He gave us the how-to book called the Torah and Mitzvos. So as we go into the Shabbos, blessing the new month, the Jew has the power to start again a new month. It's also like Rosh Chodesh is like a Rosh Hashanah for the month. It's a new opportunity. We have a new chance. We build on the old, but we gain strength from the new. God bless you. Have a great Shabbos and a great Chodesh, and look forward to see you all in Shul. Shabbat Shalom.